2024, much like the previous year, was stacked with incredible high-profile releases. And similarly again, I failed to play most of them. Though that failure was not born from inadequacy or any single or series of missteps, but by design. I continued my habit and fueled my addiction to retro and indie games, and as doing so consistently results in, I was thoroughly satisfied. That is not to say that I had no interest in all of the high-profile releases of the year, as many of them I would love to have played, and would still love to play at some point. But I instead found my time spent on the seemingly ever-growing stock of new indie games and older games that I already have, though have never played or completed. And in my unending quest to do away with said list of unplayed games, I began the year making yet another mistake, as I often do, though this error luckily coming with no regrets, as it was of course by purchasing a new game, despite having plenty unplayed already. Before getting into the list and details of each game, however, I feel I should provide some disclaimers. First, this list is in no particular order in terms of favoritism or preference. The games are not ranked or scored in any way, at least not in any way that will be detailed here. They are in the order that I completed them, nothing more, and I took all my notes on each game while playing and finalized them as soon as I could after finishing each game so the game would be as fresh in my mind as manageable. Second, none of these notes are meant to be purely objective or subjective exclusively, which should be clear. I did my best to include both objective information regarding the actual quality of the game as well as my personal opinion of the game and my own experience with it. Third, the quality of footage will unfortunately vary, as OBS does not seem to have any interest in treating me kindly, so for a handful of games I'll simply include trailers or other promotional material as my footage is not high enough quality to include. Similarly, any games for the Nintendo Switch will not have my own gameplay footage. I only have a Switch Lite, so I don't have the capability to capture any footage directly from it, aside from the short clips on the device itself, which to take and save all the captures I would need for this video would simply be too much of a hassle, and I am admittedly impatient. Lastly, the amount of detail I go into each game will be relatively short, as there are a lot of games on this list, so I apologize for my brevity. If there are any games here that you'd like me to do a full review on, please let me know in the comments, as there are plenty games on this list I'd be more than happy to play again and speak on in greater detail. For now though, let's get to it. Momodora Moonlit Farewell. First game I started, first I played it all, and first I completed in 2024, and I'm very pleased. In fact, I was so pleased I completed it to 109% of the in-game tracker. And what a way to start the year it was. It was a lovely entry in an overall, consistently strong series, and I'm increasingly sad that it marks the end of the series. However, as lovely as it was and as impactful as it was as the final entry, it wasn't perfect. And I'm not sure if it was even better than Reverie Under the Moonlight, the previous entry. There were a few boss fights that weren't quite as engaging, with quite a few feeling like nothing more than gimmicks, and ended up being mostly just repetitive. Some sections were just monster closets that would basically appear out of nowhere, and didn't always make sense contextually. Also, there were a couple points where hitboxes seemed a little off, like they got out of sync from one room to another, like the hitbox was just a little bit too far to the side compared to where it was on the same enemy and the area before it. As for positives, the world was incredible. Exploration was absolutely stronger here. The map was a comfortable size, never feeling too complicated, and you earned fast travel pretty early on, making backtracking to get secrets and additional items much easier and more streamlined. Lots of new and interesting mechanics with buffs and weapon modifications, and a lot of abilities earned through regular progression. The quality of animation and pixel art is off the charts. Fantastic style. I don't know if it was better, but it certainly wasn't bad. Even with the negatives, and as significant as they may have been, it was still so good, I didn't want to stop once I started. I followed Momodora with a streak of short titles on the Switch. That streak starting with Squidlet. It was super cute, super short, super simple. You only move and jump and that's it. But what it does in such a short time and with so little is surprisingly good. The encounters are clever, there's silly and quirky humor, and it all looks and plays fantastic. It actually reminded me a lot of Kirby Dream Land, and that it's very basic and very short, which I don't mean as an insult, is it executes everything very effectively. I loved it and really appreciated what it did with such a short runtime, taking not even an hour to complete. Moving forward, I played Tiny Dragon Story, another fantastic, even though super short, low pixel platformer. Straightforward levels, a handful of different enemy types, different environmental factors and hazards, different traversal options, and a few different bosses, a couple of which were actually quite challenging and took a not insignificant number of attempts before beating. Basic, but very enjoyable experience that could be finished in a sitting or two depending on how much time you have. My only complaint worth mentioning was one level that I think broke or glitched to where I literally could not progress, so I exited the level, quit the game and relaunched, and it was marked as completed. So I have no idea what happened there, but it definitely couldn't have been intentional. Otherwise, it was a smooth and satisfying little ride. Next, to complete the short streak of pixel platformers was Rava and the Cyclops Curse. Tons of old school NES charm, a killer soundtrack, and some solid challenge. Having to use different abilities for different applications was an enjoyable mechanic, and I believe it was implemented well. There was good enemy variety even though all enemies were relatively simple, plus plenty of other hazards throughout the levels. Lots of secrets and power-ups hidden along the way, and a satisfying enough boss fight at the end of it all. At times it felt like there were too many enemies on screen at once, especially when there were also various environmental hazards making the screen feel a bit cluttered, but it never impacted performance and was never so excessive that it felt unfair or impossible. It was just challenging and required a fair amount of patience. There was only enough story to set the premise, plus a cutscene to close it out before the credits, but I think that's all it needed. It was a pretty strong little retro action platformer that provided a decent challenge over the course of the approximately 1 hour runtime. I would definitely recommend to anyone looking for a bit of NES charm but still wanting something new. Next, going completely away from retro, was Portal, which was very impressive. I can only imagine how unique the mechanics were at the time of release. Even today it was still really impressive, even though I've seen the portal gun mechanics utilized further. Despite being impressed, I felt the overall experience was more tedious than anything. The puzzles were never particularly difficult to solve. The difficulty came in completing them successfully in terms of lining the portals up just right or getting the jumps just right, and it wasn't as easy as it felt it should have been, as there were many times that I would emerge from a portal upside down and or turned around despite having placed the portal in the correct direction. That tedium was especially amplified when having to place additional portals while in the air. Sneak peek to a little later in the video, but while playing the first, I hadn't played the second, yet. And all I could think while playing was that if the second is just like this but longer, I wasn't gonna like it. Even though countless people swoon over the second, it had me nervous knowing the second would be coming later for me in the year, which should tell you a lot about how I felt about the first. To shift gears though, this next entry isn't entirely new, so I don't know how much it should even be included in this video, but I feel I need to acknowledge it, at least to some extent, even if the only reason is because I think the game deserves it. I finished the 2 additional endings of the new Lords of the Fallen. I gave the Radiance ending a 10 out of 10 last year, and this year I'm giving both the Inferno and Umbral endings exactly the same. It genuinely only gets better. In retrospect, I'm very glad I did the Radiance ending first, because it is without a doubt the weakest of the 3 endings, with Umbral being the most interesting and rewarding without question. Elian the Starved, the Umbral ending final boss, is absolutely the best in the game, no competition. I would also like to take this time to apologize for not making a standalone review video for it yet. I said I would with my 2023 year in review video, and obviously still have released absolutely nothing. But I had a full script written with tons of footage recorded, and then all of a sudden the developers decided they weren't actually done with the game, despite having completed their post-launch roadmap and having officially started development on a sequel. To give context as to how determined and deep I was into the process of making a video for it, the draft of the script I had clocked in at just shy of 2 hours during a test read. Once they started further updates though, I stopped all work on it because I would prefer to review it once it is actually complete, so I could acknowledge all stages of its quality and status as opposed to just one iteration from which more came. I still have every intention of making that video, but when I actually complete it will be determined by the developers and how long they continue to support it. So we'll see, and to be clear, that is not a complaint at all, as the fact that they're continuing support at all is incredible to me. Anyways, enough with the Lords of the Fallen tangent, which I could clearly talk about all day. After finishing the 2 remaining endings, I played Kirby Triple Deluxe, which was another win for Kirby, but not so much for me personally. I enjoyed much of the level design and gameplay, but the reliance on the 3D effect made it just alright. And that combined with another main flaw made it maybe even less than alright. The reliance on the 3D effect made it so that when 3D was turned off, determining the depth of some models was near impossible. 2 enemies would be coming towards me, and I would be jumping, think I'm going to jump over one enemy, when I'd actually just be jumping into the other, because I couldn't accurately discern the layer each was at. This was amplified substantially in boss fights, with many projectile attacks going from foreground to background, back and forth, without it being clear where the safe area in between was. Also, some of the bosses were just too long for my taste. The final boss especially. It eventually started feeling like it was a never-ending gauntlet. Lastly, the entirety of the final stage was just copied and pasted from the previous portions of the game, not actually being its own fully unique area at all, making the whole end of the game feel repetitive and like it was artificially extending runtime without providing much of anything new to justify its inclusion. It was all stylistically gorgeous, but ended up feeling too hard to read and a little tedious, which really stretched my patience, making me not enjoy it as much as I probably would have had it not been in 3D. My year started with 2D pixel art and eventually became 3D action games, which is not unlike the next game I finished. Evoland was pretty much exactly what I was hoping it would be. A short and simplified introduction to the turn-based RPG genre. It even lists a number of its influences in the credits, including Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. It actually went beyond the turn-based genre too, including puzzles influenced by Zelda, and entire hack-and-slash sections influenced by Diablo. It was overflowing with charm and delightfully self-aware, with item pickups like Ring of Luck, which is described as plus 5% chance to picking up gear you can actually use. Packed full of charm, really. The only detriment for me was the final boss, with mechanics that weren't clear and poorly communicated through the gameplay, and depth that was hard to read and definitely limited by the graphics and lighting. But overall, it was great, and really interesting to see this pseudo-summary of the evolution of graphics and style over time. I highly recommend. Back to platformers, next was Marsupilami Hubadventure, and I have no idea if I'm saying either of those words correctly. But regardless of pronunciation and questionable titles, the game was excellent. It ran super smooth, had satisfying fluid movement, where you could easily get into that flow state when trying to speedrun levels, which I would find myself doing without even realizing. It would be a brand new level, but I'm cruising through it so fluidly that all of a sudden I'm going faster and faster, skipping items because the movement and flow through the environment was just so satisfying. It brought a fair amount of challenge, a fair amount of collecting, but was still short, sweet, and to the point. It was really a strong and really focused, fast-paced 2D platformer that got surprisingly high remarks from me. To stick with platformers, next was Marble It Up Ultra, which was just more marbly goodness. I honestly don't have much to say, which isn't a bad thing. It ran great, performance was super smooth, responsive, crisp, with the wonderful momentum and physics that you'd expect. It was basically the previous entry, but more and better, with plenty of extras on top. If you're a fan of any of the Marble Blast games or the previous Marble It Up, or just physics-based platforming in general, I couldn't recommend it enough. It's an easy pick to keep you coming back and engaged for more than enough time. Back to Kirby, next was Planet Robobot, which of course is another stellar entry into the main Kirby lineup. If I had to rank them all, it would probably be in my top 3, and if not, it would be really close. The depth issues from the 3DS screen that were present in Triple Deluxe aren't present here, as everything was very crisp and clear. Planet Robobot, aside from Forgotten Land for being the only real 3D game, and games like Mass Attack for the almost gimmicky touchscreen focus controls, is probably the most unique I've played so far. With a lot of puzzles and combat revolving around the mech armor abilities specifically. One thing I am realizing though, is that my main and recurring annoyance with Kirby games is the duration of the endgame. It ends up being boss after boss, and then phase after phase. In Robobot, you go from fighting Mecha Knight Plus to Haltman, which is a long fight itself, and directly into the Stardream fight, which, if I was counting correctly, was a whole 5 phases, with no breaks in between other than the phase transition cutscene. The endgame always ends up feeling like an endurance test that gets really close to overstaying its welcome. I think I'd prefer if there was a level or some type of break between the different fights, like Mecha Knight Plus, then a short level or minigame, then Haltman, short level or minigame, and then Stardream to end it, so you could at least get some type of reprieve. I like a good boss rush, but this just felt like it was a smidge too much all at once. Either way, it was still fantastic overall. Now for another entry which I'm not sure is appropriate to include on this list, as Sigil 2 is just an expansion, and not even an official one. But it's new, it's Doom, and it's by John Romero, so I'm going to include it. As much as that introduction seems to hype it up, I wish it was as consistently good as you'd think, considering. But the first half was incredible, and it dropped off after that. The level design was intricate and thoughtful, but then it got repetitive. And not by looks, obviously, because I know there are limited assets, but in actual design. Romero seemed to really like hidden door switches, as that's a repeated occurrence, and much too often for my taste. The last few levels were so tedious it passed enjoyability, and the last level specifically was genuinely no more than questionable. You end up in the center of a 3-way fight between a spider mastermind and 2 cyber demons with no cover. It took way too long, and it felt like it was all based on luck and chance rather than any skill. With the limited assets, I wonder how many more expansions he'll make for Doom 1, considering the limitations. If the best he can do is put you in a crossfire between 3 endgame bosses, it kind of worries me for what may come next, if another chapter is in the future. Next up, to no surprise, another 2D pixel art game, Lost Ruins. At first I wasn't having a very good time because it felt like the pace of enemies was faster than mine. Like they attacked faster, they moved faster, and recovered from my attacks faster too. With a lot of my attack speeds being so slow and movement speeds slower and getting staggered for longer, it did feel unbalanced for a while, especially in the beginning. It was just way too easy to get stun-locked even by just one basic enemy. But then as I progressed and got some health upgrades and stronger weapons, it was much more reasonable, and even found some cheese strategies with different item combos. And despite having found said cheese strategies, I did refrain from relying on them, and still ended up having a really good time overall. The pixel art was immaculate too. I was especially surprised by the shading and the lighting. It was really impressive. Easily some of the best I've ever seen. The character models will probably turn a lot of people away with the multiple anime schoolgirl characters, but the gameplay and story was all very consistently strong. I would definitely recommend to anyone who enjoys shorter, more survival-focused Metroidvanias. Naturally, next is even more 2D pixel art anime style. Metal Unit was really interesting, though it had me a bit conflicted. I really liked some of it, wasn't sure what to think of other parts, and at other times it was just alright. So overall, I'm not really sure what to say about it. I loved the art and the style of it all. It seemed to be heavily inspired by Neon Genesis Evangelion, from the premise, aesthetic, and even story moments and presentation. The story itself had me intrigued in the beginning, hungry for more in the middle, and then a strange combination of satisfied but confused at the end. The combat was good but far too punishing at some moments for my taste, and when you have such long episodes and feel like you can't stop until you either finish the episode or die, it did grow to be a bit tedious at times. The individual mechanics were very rewarding though, unlocking new weapons and materials, finding synergies between the different abilities, unlocking new suit upgrades and synthesizing new gear from old gear. There was a surprising amount to engage with, especially considering the low price tag. It got a little tedious and repetitive at times, but the mechanics and character progression were engaging enough to keep me invested. Then add the wild story on top of it, and it's an easy recommendation for anyone who likes roguelikes and 2D action platformers, even though it required some extra patience. Once more, we returned to Dreamland with Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn. Extra Epic Yarn was definitely the easiest Kirby. You literally could not fail or be reset, so it ended up being a little less engaging as there wasn't much necessity in being careful or trying to play skillfully. The only benefit is getting more points and finishing each level with a higher score, as points are lost with each hit instead of health. Even though it wasn't as engaging as the other games, it was without a doubt the cutest, most wholesome, and I think most unique other than Forgotten Land. But that's only because it's the only fully 3D game. Epic Yarn has such a unique style and charm to it. Everything looks like it's made of yarn, cloth and buttons and other little trinkets, giving the whole game this adorable storybook crafty feel that's just over the top with wholesomeness. Not as engaging, but a spectacle in its own stylistic way, all backed by an absolute gem of a soundtrack. Maintaining the theme of wholesomeness, Refresh was super cute. A simple little platformer collectathon about helping a town rebuild. It was relaxing, enjoyable, and had plenty of charm for such a compact little game. Could easily beat it in a sitting or two, as it only took about a couple hours to finish. Would definitely recommend for anyone who enjoys a positive-focused cozy game. Now for the complete opposite. The simplest way I can describe Ultra Kill is as a budget Doom Eternal with PS1 graphics. And I mean that in the best way possible. The term budget is not intended as a slight in any way, and it is entirely meant as a compliment, as it is a really strong indie take on that high-intensity, high-aggression action gameplay. Not that it's needed, but to make even more comparisons, it's like the setting and story of the original Doom 2, with the graphics of Quake, but the gameplay mechanics of Doom Eternal. A seemingly wide-reaching love letter to id Software, and a very well-made one. There's plenty of weapon variety, enemy variety, health regeneration through melee kills, platforming, blood, guts, and all that gory goodness while killing demons and angels alike. Fighting through very unique and memorable bosses and hordes of other who knows what throughout the sometimes seemingly overpopulated layers of hell. That last note being my only serious criticism, being that sometimes the rooms just felt overstuffed with enemies. Like the developers just decided, hey, let's put 5 of each enemy you've encountered, bosses included, all in one room and just call it good. Not seeming like they paired particularly well or complemented each other in any specific way, but just put there because more enemies equals more hard. Which is true, but I don't think it's for the right reasons. All in all, it was a high-octane and high-adrenaline action-packed delight that I am definitely interested in seeing finished, as it is still in early access. Would highly recommend to anyone who enjoys Doom, Quake, or any other classic arcade shooters, or just high-intensity and demanding first persons. Having only dipped my toes into visual novels, I figured I should continue exploring the genre, or medium rather. And so next I played Slay the Princess. What a trip. I played through it and got the good ending immediately. Took probably less than 10 minutes and I was thoroughly confused. So I immediately played again feeling like there had to be more. And more there was. So much more. I've enjoyed the visual novels I've played, or read, before, But this one was on another level of quality that immediately made my appreciation of the genre skyrocket, to the point where there are a handful more on this list, and even more that will be on my list for the coming year. I don't even want to describe anything from it because I don't want to spoil anything, because this is absolutely a must-play. What an experience. Please go out, get it, and make sure to finish it. Feeling rather moved by the narrative-focused nature of the visual novel, I continued to another narrative-focused game, Vampire the Masquerade: Heartless Lullaby. Heartless Lullaby was a solid, short experience. It had some humor, some intensity and shock, a little bit of mystery. For about an hour-long free point-and-click game, it had a decent amount to offer. I've never played anything else from the Vampire the Masquerade series, though I would certainly like to, especially Bloodlines. And I know Heartless Lullaby isn't canon, but I imagine this is a decent enough introduction to what that world is, and it has me even more interested in what the official games in the series have to offer. I'd easily recommend to anyone who likes vampires and has about an hour to kill. Next is what I spoiled earlier, which I had put off and was exceedingly hesitant to play at all. Portal 2 was literally better than the first in every way. Where I grew tired of the first even just halfway through, the second had me hooked start to finish, to the point where I missed sleep just to keep playing. More story, more character, more variety, more charm, more locations and set pieces, and the actual puzzles were so much stronger. I don't even know what it was exactly or how to explain it, but it just didn't grow old or get tiring the same way the first game did. It just had that it factor, to where it was a smooth and constant progression beginning to end. And the ending itself was weird, funny, and surprisingly touching. I'm very glad I didn't skip it based on my experience with the first game, because it is completely unique and absolutely worth playing if you haven't already. Honestly, I don't even have anything else to say about it. You have to play it if you haven't yet. Next was something a bit different, not in terms of gameplay, but subject matter. Raji, an ancient epic, was a very straightforward and solid little action-adventure game. It was a nice change of scenery, too. I really enjoyed the Indian setting and Hindu subject matter. There was a lot of religious dialogue dumps from Hindu gods telling their stories, which was really interesting. The only downside is that while the dialogue was going on, you were kind of stuck just standing there, waiting to be able to activate the next one. So it did hamper the pace of the game a little bit, but was still valuable and welcome. Also, if you have any interest in Indian music, you'll likely find the soundtrack very satisfying. The combat was good and the bosses were challenging, with time dodges and multiple unique weapons to choose from, hidden items throughout the levels to promote exploration, although that exploration was a bit minimal, beautiful environments and set pieces, and stylized cutscenes to keep the story moving and the tone consistent. One other con is that some of the platforming sections lacked shading or depth, to where a jump looked lined up, but wasn't actually, so a little bit of jank here and there, but nothing game-breaking, not even close. It left with a little bit of a cliffhanger too, so I'm hoping there will be a chance to return to these characters, or at least the setting in the future. It goes on sale pretty often and only took a few hours to beat, so if you're interested in the culture and short action adventure games, it's definitely worth picking up. Looking Up, I See Only a Ceiling was a decent little point-and-click thriller that left me thinking about all the potential meanings and symbols at the end of it, far more than I had anticipated. It was a little silly at parts, and I think there were some translation errors, but overall it was an enjoyable half-hour or so visual novel point-and-click thriller that I'd happily recommend to anyone with $2 to spare. So if you're interested in more information, I'd appreciate it if you checked out my other video on it. Following up with a game I wish I would have done a playthrough for, even though it is flawed, Fossil Fuel 2 started really strong but ended quite poorly in my opinion. So overall it was a good time, but it's easy to say otherwise since the ending was unfortunately the low point of the runtime. The mechanics were solid enough and there was tons of suspense and really good atmosphere, and each area was packed full of solid encounters and really effective scares that I will admit had me just about jump out of my seat. I don't know why, but for some reason the scares in this game just really got to me. Not that I was genuinely or deeply afraid, but that the scares were just effective, if that makes sense. The level design was intuitive and easy to work through, and had enough points of interest to never feel lost or like I was wandering. For about a 2-hour game and only the ending being the real noteworthy negative, it gets an easy recommend from me. But just go in knowing that the first 3/4 or so are easily the best, and after that it gets over the top and kind of relies too heavily on gimmicks and campy design to the point where it feels like a B-movie experience as much as an indie game, which for some may be a positive. Regardless, be aware, but whatever your stance on that, it's still easy to have a good time. Back to visual novels, Paranormasight, I think I'm saying that right, The Seven Mysteries of Hanjo was an absolutely incredible time. It had a couple issues and some puzzles that were a little too meta for my taste. Things like having to change settings that don't even do anything, for example. But those issues didn't hold it back, as it came with a riveting story and captivating characters whose fates are all intricately intertwined in ways that will shock and in some cases devastate. It's a bountiful blend of paranormal horror, murder mystery, and very grounded suspense thriller with twists and turns and direction changes in every which way as you switch from character to character, going down multiple different timelines back to back. Uncovering one part of the mystery but asking multiple new questions too. I finished it in under 10 hours and was glued to the screen every time I played. I'm not the most experienced or seasoned visual novel enthusiast by any means, as I just got into them last year, but if this isn't the peak, I can't imagine what is. Could not recommend enough. If interested in the subject matter at all, even if you're not into visual novels, I'd still consider it a must-play experience. And I'm saying all this while having earned the bad ending. Next was something completely different. Buckshot Roulette, which was an incredible bite-sized piece of suspense horror. I don't know what else to say, honestly. It'll have you sweating, counting shells, strategizing, and planning what items to use and when to use them. And have you constantly asking yourself, do I risk it? An excellent little bite-sized horror piece that you can beat in less than half an hour. Couldn't recommend it enough. What a treat. To continue with horror, next was Detention. Going in blind, it did an excellent job of making themes seem normal at first, at least as normal as can be considering the setting, getting you into a comfortable rhythm of just trying to get home, making a friend, making jokes, and then throwing you in headfirst to the horror and bleak and dreary atmosphere that is the rest of the game. It's dark, eerie, and will have you asking a lot of questions with the puzzles to solve. However, it might have you asking those questions seemingly aimlessly, and by that I ultimately mean wandering aimlessly, as some of the puzzles were so vague and unintuitive that I, at least, was not able to solve them without looking them up. Things like requiring 3 dice before you can roll them, and only being able to roll dice into a bowl. I don't know of any dice games that require 3 specifically, and I've never rolled dice into a bowl. So I don't know if it's a me thing, cultural translation thing, as Detention's developers are Taiwanese, or just very vague puzzles that I wasn't paying close enough attention to, which of course is entirely possible. This trait unfortunately persists too, but adds a lot of back and forth on top of it. It will have you pick up one item in one end of the area, only to go all the way to the opposite side of the area, to use it on something, only for that interaction to give you another item that is to be used back on the opposite side of the area. Now, I'm only exaggerating a little bit, but I'm sure if you played similar games, you know exactly what I mean with all the back and forth, and how quickly that tedium can weigh on you. And with such a slow movement speed, and ghosts that have you hold your breath to get past them, which makes you move even slower, it ended up feeling like a drag by the time I reached the end. And it's a short game, with an average completion time of only around 3 hours on how long to beat, but that still felt like too long, or at least like everything was just moving too slow. That of course is all in regards to the gameplay itself, the interactive side of things, as the story was very, very interesting. I don't know if it was enough for me to recommend though. I almost think it would have been better as a visual novel. Having recently come off Paranormasight, I feel like it would have been better as a visual novel, so the story and art could have been the focus without having slow and tedious gameplay and back and forth on repeat to detract from the experience. Still continuing with horror, not sure what got into me this time of year as it certainly wasn't close to Halloween, was Crow Country. Though there are many positives, about halfway through I started to realize something. maybe I don't like puzzle-heavy games, especially ones with otherwise strong mechanics and gameplay. Also, I don't think I'm very good at them. Finishing Detention and Crow Country back-to-back just may have been too much puzzle-heavy horror for me, with one right after the other at least. The art style, atmosphere, world, and exploration was otherwise immaculate though. The pseudo-low-poly look was drenched with PS1 nostalgia, taking clear influence from and paying much homage to a number of classics from that era, like Silent Hill and Resident Evil, and maybe even Final Fantasy VII with some of the choices in art direction. Gameplay was great, albeit frustrating, but all in service of that art direction. Truly going all in with the clunky as can be tank controls. The story was excellent too, with little bits of information scattered all over the map, letting you piece the mystery together slowly as you continue to progress and explore. Overall, it's an easy recommend, and if you like survival horror, then it's an easy pickup. A lot of the puzzles are made simple, with the answers well telegraphed, or being in the room right before the actual puzzle, making it much easier than some other titles in the genre. And there's an exploration mode too, which removes all of the enemies from the game. So I would definitely recommend it for someone just trying to get into the genre, or who isn't familiar but wants to try it out. Done with the random horror streak, Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards was next. Had a really good time with this, so much so that it might be up there with my favorites. The look was immaculate. Overall it was simple and straightforward, but mostly effective, and did provide a decent little challenge too. The way you can combine copy abilities is addicting and honestly one of the most interesting functions I've seen in a Kirby game so far, and I hope it will be implemented in a future title. I used to want a remaster of this game so I could play it on modern hardware without having to emulate, but now that I've finished it, I don't think it needs a remaster. Honestly, just a straight port would be sufficient. Also, the final boss was insane, incredibly frustrating, surprisingly, just very challenging. Had some annoying moves and timings, but wow, was it a satisfying win. I think the only real or noticeable flaw for me was some layering confusion, similar to the issue I had with Triple Deluxe. It was hard at times to discern what layer was foreground from the background and the platform that I was on, resulting in a lot of damage that I definitely wouldn't have taken had I been able to see more clearly what layer everything was on. Missed attacks that I believed I would have landed for the same reason. But all in all, I loved it, and with the short runtime and simple design, I think it would make a really good starting point for someone interested in getting into the Kirby franchise. Similar to my inclusion of Sigil 2 on this list and concerns voiced towards the Game Awards, I don't know how appropriate this being included is. I know Shadow of the Erdtree is an expansion and not a full game, but considering the amount of content included in it and how many people are referring to it as its own game for that reason, I figured I'd go ahead and include it here too. Although I'm honestly not too sure what to say about it, or how I feel about it for that matter. Needless to say, it's been a controversial topic, with being the highest rated DLC of all time, but also being heavily criticized by a large portion of the fanbase. I feel like I kind of fall in the middle. I'm pretty torn between really liking it, and also a sad, sour disappointment, going back and forth between those two feelings consistently throughout my playthrough. To start, I love the look, of course. The world is just as incredible, if not more, than the base game, with places like the Cerulean Coast and the hinterlands being just completely jaw-dropping levels of beautiful, despite how hostile they still were. And that walkout moment into the gravesite plains, giving me that same excitement as when I entered Limgrave the first time. But as I dove into the exploration, disinterest started to set in, and surprisingly quickly. I felt like my exploration wasn't yielding the results it should have or that I expected, which I didn't really have any specific expectations, but I certainly wasn't thrilled finding cookbook after cookbook and stacks of smithing stones over and over again. That's not to say they aren't useful or valuable, of course, but I just didn't really care, and I honestly can't even really say why. By the time I got through the first couple areas, I didn't really feel any drive to explore and wander around like I did with the base game. I just didn't feel incentivized to do so, and ended up trying to streamline areas best I could with what I could infer, since I still didn't want to look up any guides during my first run. Aside from the open world or overworld, however you want to describe it, the legacy dungeons really hit the spot for me. Bellarat, the Shadow Keep, Sunken Chapel District, and Divine Tower are easily among my favorite locations in the whole game. Shadow Keep especially for its layout, and Divine Tower especially for the visuals. However, a significant number of the bosses throughout them served more as a detriment to that otherwise positive perspective. The Golden Hippopotamus, Rolana, the Dancing Lion, and Radon all got negative marks for me on my initial playthrough. The Hippo and Dancing Lion felt unnatural to fight, and the performance was severely lacking for me on Series X, with the particle effects and rapid camera movement while locked on resulting in painful frame drops and borderline motion sickness. Rolana felt overly aggressive and far too punishing to be placed as early on as she was, but I'll admit I did enjoy it a lot more on subsequent playthroughs, and don't see her as negatively as I did initially. Radon, however, I have near nothing good to say about. I fought him for a total of probably about 10 hours before I finally beat him, maybe 10 and a half, and that was with multiple loadout changes, leaving to get a handful of levels and fragments, and then a rebirth before I finally got him. I enjoyed Phase 1 well enough, but I found basically zero satisfaction in Phase 2. I was very close to just giving up multiple times, and by the time I beat him, all I could think was, this was not made for me at all. This wasn't made for someone like me. This was made for streamers and challenge runners and people who are way better than me and have way more time than I do. That ended up being my thought on the majority of the DLC experience in total. It didn't feel like it was made for a player like me. Where the base game provided ample opportunity and means for the player to progress, level, and build up their character, the DLC turned everything into a stone wall with success seemingly locked behind fragments, which I won't go into detail with, as I feel Merlin's video, which will be linked in the description, does a great job of explaining it. So I highly recommend you check that out. As I said before, it wasn't my cup of tea. There were a lot of moments and aspects I really enjoyed, but in total it left me wanting to play something else. When I finished the base game the first time, I wasted no time jumping straight back in to get the additional endings and all achievements. As for the DLC, I don't know if I'll ever play it again. When I finished it, I felt completely done with it. If anything, it made me want to go back and play the first Dark Souls again. Moving on, Cat Quest was very cute and very easy and very accessible. Like, incredibly simple. Almost so simple it was a detriment, but only because of the duration. By the end of my about 6-hour playthrough to complete the main story, it really just felt like Fetch Quest Simulator. The majority of the game is just doing side quests until you're high enough level to progress the main quest, of which there really isn't that much. There are some little bite-sized bits of lore and story details sprinkled into some of the side quests, but that was pretty rare. Most of it was kill a few of a certain type of monster, or go find this item, but you always get ambushed right before, or clear a cave, and it was just that over and over again. 6 hours is not a long runtime for a game, but it felt longer than it was due to the repetition and grind. I still had fun and had a good time, and the main story, as minimal as it was, did keep me interested, but I think it just needed a little more depth and less grind and copy and paste fetch quests. Overall, I would recommend it to someone maybe new to gaming who wants something cute and simple with lots of charm, or to someone who just wants a super simple game, turn your brain off, that you can play in little bite-sized chunks. 5 to 10 minutes at a time is all it takes, really. Something without any grind, or fluff at all for that matter, was Maiden and Spell, which was an absolutely wild ride that started off at a really good, slow pace with easy enemies and movesets. It was a great starting point for a bullet hell beginner like me, with 4 different story modes, each as a different character with their own unique moves, all of them being simple enough, though certainly not challenge-free. But as you get further and further, unlocking additional levels as you complete those stories, you'll eventually unlock the true ending, which is absolute insanity, ditching anything that was even suggestively newcomer-friendly, completely, as it is extremely challenging, though it was incredibly rewarding. But as you get further and further, unlocking additional levels as you complete those stories, you'll eventually unlock the true ending, which is absolute insanity, ditching anything that was newcomer-friendly completely, as it is extremely challenging, though it was incredibly rewarding to finally get it done. I also really liked the art style. I would definitely recommend it to someone who is considering a bullet hell game as their next title, even if it were their first, though would also put it on a list for experienced players, as it does have quite a few difficulty options to ramp up the challenge as needed. Completely unrelated was Helltaker. For a really short and free puzzle game, I was thoroughly surprised. Pleasantly so. The first few levels were super easy, but the last puzzles took quite a bit of planning and plenty of attempts. And the end boss fight, I guess if you can call it that, quick time sequence sort of thing, not really sure what to call it, it was awesome. It was quite challenging, but once you've gone through it a few times and you see the patterns, it's really enjoyable. Highly recommend for a quick puzzle game, and the anime-style fan service is just a bonus if you're into that stuff. Took me about an hour to beat, and it was an hour very well spent. Returning to the visual novel medium, Dagon was listed as such, but it's more like an interactive audiobook. Everything is narrated and you're in fully 3D environments. Now you can't explore them as it kind of behaves like a point-and-click game, but the settings and set pieces were fantastic. It delivers a powerful bite-sized taste of that Lovecraft brand cosmic horror and dread of the unfathomable in a very effective manner that you can get through in about half an hour. Really solid, and I definitely recommend. And it was free on Steam, so truly nothing to lose. However, I did think my Steam Deck was going to explode not even halfway through. I changed everything I could in settings in an effort to reduce the temperature, but it was pushing way too hard considering what it was. I thought my hands were going to melt with how hot the back of the Steam Deck was. It's such a simple and short game, and it's listed as verified, but the fans on the Steam Deck would say otherwise. So while I would recommend it, if a Steam Deck is all you have, be warned. Coming in with some more existential dread was Pools. Pools was one of the most simple but atmospheric games I think I've ever played. I don't know if I've ever been so needlessly anxious or scared. The game makes it clear that there are no scares, but I was scared anyways. And it makes it equally clear that there are no enemies, nothing to get you, nothing to run away from. But I kept feeling like I was going too slow, and like I couldn't get out of wherever I was fast enough. It was disturbingly fantastic. I do think it took a little bit too long to beat, even though it was only about a couple hours. I think it could have hit even harder if it was just a little bit shorter. Even still, it gets an easy recommend from me. With more horror, naturally, Tiny Bunny is a non-linear horror visual novel that is currently still in early access. The studio is planning on releasing a total of 5 episodes for it, and so far 4 have been released. So even though I finished all I could at the time, I was left with a huge cliffhanger, as I technically haven't completed the whole story since it isn't out yet. And I'm not exaggerating, I think it only took me a few seconds after finishing it to look up when that final episode would be out, and I have been eagerly waiting for it since then. And even though I haven't actually finished the whole story, I wanted to talk about it anyways for the sole reason that it was not a second short of absolutely incredible. I genuinely and wholeheartedly could not stop. It repeatedly kept me up late because I refused to put it down. It doesn't take long for the story to pick up. The pace gets crazy and sucks you in, but depending on your choices and considering the choices I made, part of it was slightly repetitive, but that didn't last long at all and wasn't a significant detriment by any means, especially when considering how absolutely insane the rest of the story was. I don't want to go into any detail or spoil anything, but if you have any interest in horror, any interest in visual novels, please get it. The quality is off the charts in literally every way. I honestly can't think of a truly bad thing to say about it. It has so much variety and will lead you on a roller coaster of emotions, from heartbreak to gut punch to dread and regret to nostalgia, and just so much I can barely explain in a way that does it any justice. It's a must. 10 out of 10, easily, and I don't even have to think about it. No hesitation or doubt at all. When I was describing Paranormicite, I said, if this isn't the peak, I can't imagine what is. But miraculously, it took me less than a year to find it because Tiny Bunny is absolutely that. It was truly phenomenal. I could gush over it for a day and a half if I let myself easily, but I will spare you the monotony and move on. So next was another story-driven adventure. Unrest is a narrative-focused CRPG taking place in a fictional, mythical, historical India. And when I say narrative-focused, I could not emphasize that enough. It's basically a visual novel, but you do have an actual character that you control. But there aren't really any other actions other than dialogue choices and who to talk to at what time. Despite the limitations or focus in terms of gameplay and interactivity, The game was fantastic. The story was very unique, very interesting, and quite captivating. I describe it as a historical political drama. You play as a number of different characters, all playing unique roles within the same story, and the decisions you make as one character will influence how things play out as the other characters. I was left making decisions that I thought were right for one character only to be completely screwed over by myself when playing as another character, which made for a really enjoyable dynamic and roleplay experience, having to deal with the consequences of my own actions, but that I made as other characters. I highly recommend for anyone interested in the setting, or like I said, in historical political dramas, or just story-focused games in general. The only weaknesses were the walking speed, which was annoyingly slow at times, and the default controls on Steam Deck, which were less than ideal, with some UI pop-in glitches of sorts, but neither of those cons were significant enough for me to not recommend it. It was still a really good experience overall that I really enjoyed and would confidently recommend. Next up, and more justified as Halloween approached, was another horror game. Surprise, surprise. Nightmare of Decay is a survival horror game that I would describe as a bite-sized first-person Resident Evil, with limited resources, environmental puzzles, and areas unlocked only after certain tasks have been completed, and a whole lot of backtracking. It plays very much like a classic Resident Evil, and even though it's in first person, it feels like you're playing with a limited control system. The controls themselves are just like any other FPS, but walking backwards is incredibly slow, and you take a huge hit to your speed when reloading. Your stamina bar is basically microscopic, so you can't sprint for very long, and navigating past enemies is just as much a challenge as fighting them with how tanky your character feels. As nostalgic as it may be, I would consider it the only significant detriment, since the movement limitations just feel kind of out of place in an otherwise very responsive first-person shooter, to the point where it just felt like artificial difficulty, which for me was really unfortunate because I'm the type of person who will feel kind of burnt out with games like this. Extremely vague puzzles that leave me walking around aimlessly until I stumble onto what I need to. But this was so compact and focused that I never felt like I was wandering. I always had a good idea of where I needed to go or what I needed to do after picking up an item. So it felt like I was always making consistent progress, never aimlessly. It was a solid experience all the way through that I'd recommend for the enjoyer of survival horror, but who maybe doesn't have a ton of time, considering you can beat it in just a few hours. Now for another question mark next to the original Doom, A Legacy of Rust, another expansion taking a place on this list where usually only a full game would, was simply too good to pass up. Described as the first official expansion to feature new weapons and enemies since Doom 2, it was absolutely incredible. If you've seen my other video on how long we play our favorite games, you already know Doom is one of my all-time favorites, and this expansion is absolutely deserving of a spot among the other full titles on this list, and genuinely deserves to be mentioned when discussing Doom as a whole. The new enemies serve a unique purpose, and the new weapons are more than welcome when needing to combat them. These are honestly some of the best Doom maps I've played in recent memory, and the Visago, I don't know how you say it, is easily a new favorite enemy in the ranks of the Doom demons. It's short, sweet, packs punch after punch of stellar level after the next of high-octane, demon-slaying goodness. If you're a fan of Doom to any capacity, you will very likely love this expansion. And if you like first-person shooters, classic or not, this is still an easy must-play. Now for most people, this next one will probably sound insane, but I finally beat Skyrim for the first time. I've played it many times, started it, wandered, got lost, and eventually lost interest, which to many may sound impossible. And honestly, I can't really explain why I lost interest all those other times I played. But this time I was determined to beat it, which completing the main questline isn't much of a challenge in itself, but finishing a game I've already given up on multiple times is a challenge. At least it is for me. But this time was different. I dived in and I prioritized immersion to the best of my ability. I was fully invested in treating it like a full experience. In-game, I maintained a diet, a sleep schedule, I traveled by carriage and by foot, I grew to care about the characters, I cared about my companions, I mourned a little bit when I lost one of them, I bought a house, I adopted a little girl, I spent time exploring and getting lost in the woods and along the rivers, and I enjoyed the scenery and the skies. I really, truly enjoyed it. By the time I finished the main quest, I honestly struggled to put the controller down. When being transported out of Sovngarde and put back to Paarthurnax, I just sat there watching the dragons fly away and circle the mountain for longer than I think I even realized. It's like it hit me that the story was over, and I really didn't want it to be. The end came too quickly, and I don't mean that as a criticism. I just didn't want to stop playing. Knowing I still had a long list of other games to play, I of course did stop playing, eventually. But I have zero doubt in my mind that I could sink hundreds of hours into this world and not regret it. It has plenty of problems, plenty of jank, tons of strange design choices and forced interactions and bugs and nonsensical AI behaviors, and none of those things are a secret. But it was such a good time overall that I'd happily do it all over again. On to another winner. Scars Above is another game that is exactly what I like and exactly what I look for. It seems to fit into that AA category really comfortably. It's not the best thing you've ever seen, and it's not perfectly polished either, but I don't think it's trying to be, and that's completely alright, because it still looks really good. It has style to it, and clearly has a lot of solid quality aspects to it all around. It made for a honestly really enjoyable time. It's a solid third-person shooter, sci-fi action-adventure. To me, it seemed like it was inspired by Halo in terms of some art direction and setting, Doom in terms of some gameplay, and I mean the newer Dooms, and Alien in terms of story. I saw a lot of nods to all three franchises, but never in ways that were excessive or questionable. It was an interesting and I thought pretty unique story that easily could have taken a turn and become something very generic and something that seems like it had been done before. But it was consistently written and stayed focused with its story, and I was pleasantly surprised. The gameplay was definitely very engaging too. With only 4 weapons, you'd think there wouldn't be much depth, but with the way you can combo them with each other and other equipment you have, plus combos with environmental effects, there's actually a lot to keep you engaged and thinking and keep you on your feet. And that's not even mentioning that different enemy types have different weaknesses, different weak spots, and sometimes different layers of resistances, requiring quick weapon switches mid-combat in order to fight effectively. I could give this game nothing but praise, but there were still a few nitpicks. And I do mean that very literally. All the issues I encountered were very minimal, most hardly worth mentioning. Just a couple visual glitches, random lighting errors, a couple very small spots that were missing textures, like the edges of ponds not having the water surface. The faces during cutscenes were well within the boundaries of the uncanny valley, as the expressions and movement never looked quite right. The only serious issue I had was 2 times that the necessary prompts wouldn't appear, which I'm sure was just a very simple bug, but it was slightly frustrating since it did halt my progression, or at least my pace, for a handful of minutes while I wandered around looking for prompts, only for them to appear where I had already been later. Even with those issues though, I couldn't be happier with my time with it. Scars Above was a killer little sci-fi adventure that I would easily recommend to anyone even a little interested. Once I started, I didn't really want to stop. I beat the whole game in just 2 sittings and got all but 4 achievements. If you're alright with a little bit of jank and just a little tiny bit of polish missing, you'll probably love it. I know I did. Back to something a little cuter, Mika and the Witch's Mountain was another super simple but super cute game that you could beat in just a couple sittings. It reminded me a lot of A Short Hike, with the simple art style and wholesome story, a cast of lovable and unique characters, and a good positive message at the end. The only con I can think of is that some people might get tired of it, even though it is really short, because it basically is just a string of delivery missions one after the other. But the actual traversal and movement physics were so enjoyable and took a handful of missions to get comfortable with, honestly. And with so much optional content and exploration, there's plenty to enjoy in such a small and simple package, as long as you don't mind the somewhat repetitive nature of it. I would definitely recommend to anyone who likes short and simple cozy games. Sticking with short games, I'm unsure of whether or not I should even include BioCrisis on this list since it's so short, taking me literally less than 5 minutes to beat, and that was with 3 attempts, beating it on my 3rd. It's an old school arcade shooter where you find yourself in a laboratory overrun by zombie scientists trying to shoot your way out to survive, and that's exactly what you do. It takes place in one hallway with really just one enemy copied and pasted with different colors and different health values and some power-ups. Very simple, very straightforward, but fun for what it is. It does cost $3, which, considering the 2-minute runtime, might be a little high. Feels like it would be a free game, but considering how much work went into it, I'm sure I can only imagine, and from only a handful of people, I get it, and I support it, and I still recommend it. I would absolutely still pay $3 for it again. If you want a classic arcade shooter throwback that you can basically beat in less than one sitting, this is your game right here. And it's easy to play over and over and push for a higher and higher score to keep you playing for plenty more than just one run through. Getting back to the anime art style that I clearly love so much, Mirage Feathers is another on-rails arcade shooter, but one far more sporadic and intense than any other I've played. My experience could be summed up with lasers, missiles, and explosions galore, while violently spinning the left analog stick, hoping that I dodge the incoming projectiles. It was absurdly fast-paced, over-the-top intense, and off-the-walls amounts of spectacle. The story and style was very anime, but had some really good lines and an actually interesting story and world building that made me wonder more about the context, though unfortunately it left just about all of my questions unanswered, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but at least a little more information would have been nice. Either way, I really enjoyed it, and there were some really cool abilities and angles that the fights took place, making the spectacle of it all that much more enjoyable. Definitely worth the $5 for the about 2-hour-long story mode completion, and it makes for a quick and easy 100% completion if you're interested in achievement hunting at all. Coming next was Refined Self, which was a decent little personality game. Although it was a bit less than I thought it would be, honestly. It reminded me of The Test, which I played last year, and it kind of felt the same way, but instead of just being a series of questions, it was a series of events that were up to you with a whole lot of walking in between. It was also very explicit in telling you that every decision matters, no matter how small, to the point where I avoided interacting with certain things because I knew that would count towards the end of the game and would make the game end sooner. So I kind of wish it wasn't so direct in telling the player that every single interaction impacted the end result, and just let the player walk around and do as they please until they hit the end interaction percentage to see their personality type. I still enjoyed it a fair bit, and it only took a little over an hour to beat, but I just wish it wasn't so explicit in that direction, especially considering how short of a game it is. Next was a very pleasant surprise. Iron Meat was fantastic. It was like Doom meets The Thing with Contra wrapped around it. A great retro 2D shooter with an excellent style and identity, but also not afraid to wear its influences on its sleeve. The gameplay was smooth and fast, the action was tight and over the top, and you could beat it pretty quickly too. It took me less than 2 hours to complete, and it ran perfectly on Steam Deck. Great couple hours of gory, action-packed retro goodness. Highly recommend. I really don't have anything else to say about it. Just, you gotta go play it. Next was another short but sweet surprise. Desvelado was a really straightforward precision platformer that's focused and executes perfectly. It's not terribly difficult, and all the puzzles are relatively simple, and the time trial sections are pretty forgiving with checkpoints, so it's super easy to just pick up and play. And you can beat it in right about 2 hours. It was made by a whopping 3-person development team, and in my personal, humble opinion, they knocked it out of the park. It was 100% my kind of game. It's exactly what I look for, and I loved it. It also ran perfectly on Steam Deck. Next up is another entry I'm not sure should be here considering it's not a full release, and there's not much to say about the expansion, Vessel of Hatred. Part of me wants to say it was really, really good, and that Diablo 4 has only improved since launch, and another part wants to say the writing felt like an afterthought, to the point where I wasn't all that interested in continuing. But in terms of moment-to-moment gameplay and bosses and loot, it was so solid that overall I kind of just want to say it was more Diablo 4, but a little better, which obviously it was. Some of it felt much better, some worse. The pacing of the story was weird, and it didn't have the strongest ending in my opinion, but the moments leading up to the ending were really, really good. And I could just go on and on about pros and cons, so I'll just leave it at it was an overall solid experience that definitely adds to the overall Diablo 4 experience and package, greatly adds to it positively, but has some negatives throughout to keep it at about where it was when I played the base game. Definitely recommend, but don't go into it thinking it will have drastically altered what the base game experience was. But don't abandon hope either, as there are clear and strong improvements all throughout. Leading up to the release of Gal Guardian's Demon Purge, also known as Grim Guardian's Demon Purge, depending on where you are, It seemed a lot of people assumed it was going to be a Metroidvania, I'm guessing based purely off the art design and clear stylistic homages, and honestly, I'm so glad it wasn't. It's a mostly linear, level-based 2D action platformer with super tight combat and movement, which is all portrayed through excellent pixel art. The levels were simple but had enough alternate paths, secrets, and traversal options to give incentive to explore. The movement overall was smooth, responsive, and the boss fights were really engaging, and easily the best part of the whole game. My only significant complaints are that the player health values seemed to be a little low, at least for my taste, and I feel like the health values of the two playable characters should have been reversed. Maya, against some bosses, could die in just 2 hits, and with her being the up-close and personal character, I feel like I was being punished for using her. So most of my playthrough was with Shinobu, since I felt I could actually have time to learn patterns as her. Another minor complaint is the nature of the second half of the game. You pretty much clear the map, get to the end of the game, beat the final boss, and then the game pretty much says, just kidding, do it all over again but with everything buffed and a new final boss, because who you just fought was actually just an appetizer. The second half of the game is basically a required New Game Plus run with a new final boss, which did make the second half feel just a little bit tedious, a little repetitive. The only positive aspects of that is that the bosses are really good, and with the second time around, you can utilize all the different sub-weapons you collected from the initial run-through. Same goes for the traversal skills. In the second run, you're able to utilize quite a few shortcuts to make that second run much faster. So it depends on what kind of player you are and how much you look for those different routes that will determine how long that second run is. All in all though, it was another one of those just what I'm looking for games, just a few marks against it. While I was playing, I was angry half the time because I was admittedly pretty awful against about half the bosses, and then I had to fight them all a second time. But after finishing it and looking back at it, I really enjoyed it. The challenge and the type of pattern recognition it asked for, and would absolutely recommend. Easy pickup. There's a sequel on the way as well, which after enjoying this so much, I definitely plan to pick up if it promises a similar experience. Really consistently solid from start to finish, so I hope the follow-up can promise the same. To wrap up the year, I went with a visual novel, and to be honest, it felt kind of out of place as I was doing a lot of reading towards the end of the year, so to end with a visual novel felt kind of like a silly choice, like redundant almost, but in retrospect, I couldn't be happier. The Song of Saya was some next-level, gruesome psychological horror depravity. A visual novel filled with mystery, blood, guts, murder, torture, insanity, and somehow far worse that I can't explain or go into any detail with, at least not here on YouTube, not without getting in trouble, that is. The premise of the plot was very unique, and even though disgusting, very much captivating, keeping me fully engaged with every line of text. The majority of the main characters are horrendous and vile monsters, both inside and out, and both literally and figuratively, that take you on a journey filled with physical, spiritual, and emotional conflicts, all wrapped in a nice, thick, viscous layer of suffering and torment and questions of sanity and reality. I really wish I could explain more, but it's such a gruesome and explicit story from start to finish, with so many twists and turns that I feel any explanation would be a disservice to it. So if you have the interest and the stomach for something like it, I really can't recommend it enough. And if you do give it a try, just, well, make sure you're ready. It's pretty wild. I truly hope you played some games that were as impactful to you as the games I played were for me, as some of them were genuinely perspective shifting. I played a ton of games these past 2 years, and as happy as I am about that fact and all the games I did play, I am, thankfully, approaching the end of my backlog. So next year, I hope to play fewer games, but spend more time with each. Aside from gaming, I also plan to spend a lot more time reading, as going back and forth between both and having 2 backlogs to manage is quite a bit to power through. So once I finish my gaming backlog, I hope I'll be done with my reading backlog too. And once both are done, it'll be a very slow and intentional movement through more content. So next year's list should be much shorter, but much more in-depth. If there are any games you'd want me to play or want to hear my thoughts on, do please let me know in the comments, and I'd love to hear what games you played and what you thought about them. Any you'd recommend, any to avoid, any you might want me to review. Whatever the case, stay happy, stay healthy, and I hope to see you next time.